What is up, everybody? It's Animac here for AnimeUproar, and we are really and truly in the final phase of the Boku no Hero story. The stage has been set for what will probably be the final showdown, the battle for UA. And everything seems to be falling into place. On top of that, Toga's infiltration of the UA may have just been foreshadowed, Oboro's return may also have been foreshadowed, and Endeavor was wearing a fedora for some reason, so let's get into it. If you enjoyed the Boku no Hero videos on this channel and you want us to keep it going, you know what to do. Just leave a quick like and comment. It only takes a second, but it helps with the algorithm. And if you're new to AnimeUproar, or maybe you watch our videos regularly, but you just haven't taken the time to subscribe yet, make this the video that you subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications. Before we get into it, a quick thank you to Dislight for sponsoring this video. Dislight is a brand new pop fantasy RPG with striking visuals and outstanding characters. Collect and train your espers, form teams, and strategize your way to victory in this epic turn-based RPG fantasy. I love the stunningly vivid art style, which is inspired by both pop culture and anime, and the world of the game is just so cool. You get to play in this colorful, futuristic world where certain people attain divine powers. These humans, known as espers, must come together to save humanity from an earth-shattering threat. The divine power that awakens the espers comes from gods who are based on various mythological traditions, including Chinese, Egyptian, Greek, and Norse mythology. Just imagine ancient divine spirits in a futuristic urban setting. How freaking cool is that? Check it out for yourself by pre-registering for Dislight right now. It's totally free, and since the game is brand new, getting into it right now will give you a head start on the competition. Just click the top link in the description to pre-register right now for free, and if you do, you will be supporting this channel at the same time, so check it out, link in the description. Finally, this video will of course contain Boku no Hero manga spoilers, so please proceed with caution, you have been warned. We ended off last time with Kota and the big furry girl running up to Deku and embracing him after Ochako's big emotional speech. Kota and the furry girl are people whom Deku had directly helped in the past, and in order to help them, he had to put his own life on the line. As I said in my previous video, these two running up to Deku and embracing him, accepting him in front of the entire crowd of anti-Deku protesters would likely make the crowd think twice. After all, two people who were inside that crowd owed their lives to this man named Deku. So if these civilians are willing to vouch for him, then he must be a true hero, someone who's there to protect civilians, not put them in danger. The new chapter starts off with everyone crying again. Mineta thinks that maybe they need to run to Deku and support him, but Ida holds him back. Ida says that it isn't their place to do that, and what I think he means here is that the crowd already knows that Deku has the support of the heroes and hero students. The crowd now needs to see that Deku also has the support of normal civilians like them, people like Kota and the furry girl. At any rate, everyone is crying, including Mineta, Ida, Ochako, Kota, Deku, furry girl. I mean, it's either they're crying or the rain is falling right into their eye sockets, as our boy Roy Mustang would say. Once Kota reaches Deku, he apologizes for not coming out to support him sooner. It looks like Kota was so scared that he couldn't move, and it was only after he heard the furry girl say that Deku had saved her that he summoned up the courage to act. Then, in a very symbolic moment, Kota says to Deku, "I am here," and he tells Deku not to cry anymore. In one sense, it is of course paradoxical that a kid like Kota would quote All Might. All Might was the strongest hero who said "I am here" when he was about to beat down a bunch of villains and save the day. Meanwhile, Kota is just a weak kid with tears flowing out of his eyes, and he also appears to have snot flowing out of his nose. Like, yes, I get it, he's a kid and he's emotional, but it's also kind of gross. Anyway, the fact that Kota is quoting All Might here sends a powerful message. Kota obviously isn't going to save Deku by overpowering the villains. He is saving Deku just by giving him emotional and moral support. And that's kind of the main message of this whole arc. Strength and power alone aren't enough to make someone the greatest hero. Deku tried to rely on his own strength alone, and it didn't work. He just overwhelmed himself, exhausted himself, and nearly got himself killed. Deku cannot do everything on his own, so he needs the support of his friends and loved ones. In some cases, that will be direct physical backup by fellow heroes, but in other cases, it will just be moral encouragement or a shoulder to cry on. Human beings need to have that human connection with others. They need that system of support and a sense of community, and that is what Koda and the furry girl represent in this chapter. And speaking of the furry girl, she proceeds to pick Deku up off of his knees and raises him up so that he is standing once again. She then tells Deku that she had tried to enter many shelters, but she was refused because of her mutant type quirk. Mutant type quirks are quirks that permanently alter their user's physical appearance. In this case, the furry girl is very large and she has animal features, and this makes her different from most other humans. Because of this unconventional appearance, she was being discriminated against. The paranoid general public is seeing villains around every corner, and because this girl's appearance is so different from the norm, she was presumed to be suspicious based on her looks alone. This kind of reminds me of the racism themes in other mutant-focused media like X-Men, but the funny thing here is that it's not even about superpowers or quirks per se. Since the vast majority of the population in MHA has quirks, the discrimination isn't affecting all of them. Instead, the discrimination here is only affecting the people with mutant-type quirks because of their unique physical appearance. And yet, when you think about it, many of the most dangerous villains we know don't even have mutant-type quirks, so singling out people with these quirks is completely pointless. This is obviously a form of racism or discrimination, but unfortunately, it also makes sense based on what we know from our own world. When there is some sort of massive crisis in the world, like a war or civil war or anything like that, people tend to become paranoid and they start being suspicious of everyone who is different than they are. This is not a rational response. We obviously know that someone's physical appearance doesn't determine their personality, and yet discrimination and stereotyping often begins to occur in times of crisis. The same type of thing is now occurring in the world of MHA as the hero society descends into chaos and as the villains let loose on the population. With that said though, the furry girl is grateful that she was able to get into the UA shelter, and she thanks Deku again for saving her. She also calls him Crybaby Hiro-san, which is honestly so accurate. The furry girl is being emotional and memeing on us at the same time, and that is pretty epic. Furry girl then proceeds to hug Deku in front of everyone, and this leads to some people in the crowd second guessing their decision to reject Deku. One man in particular says that they could at least hear Deku out, since the heroes don't have enough manpower to fight off the villains anyway. Is throwing strong heroes like Deku out of the UA the smartest thing to do for the people who are sheltering there? We have to remember that during the previous arc, a bunch of heroes died and many more were injured. And then after that arc, a large number of heroes decided to retire because they couldn't handle the chaos that ensued. So now, when heroes are needed the most, there are far less heroes on duty than there were before. The heroes are seriously understaffed, so much so that they are desperately asking for heroes from other countries to come to Japan and help them. With all of that in mind, is this really the time to be kicking heroes out of the UA shelter? Wouldn't it be smarter to help them to rest up and recover so that they can be at their strongest in case the villains do attack? After all, the villains may be after Deku now, but they certainly won't stop being villains if Deku is out of the picture. One way or the other, all of these civilians will eventually suffer at the hands of the villains if they don't do something to stop them right now. That same man then explains something quite profound. He says that up until now, the general public was just the audience who watched the heroes performing on stage. They sat back in awe as the heroes handled all of society's problems and kept everyone safe at their own expense. All Might was the prime example of this, the strongest hero and the symbol of peace whose vigilant presence made everyone feel comfortable and safe. And yet, as I mentioned in my previous two MHA videos, All Might also set an unrealistic standard for heroics, and he lulled the people into a false sense of security. The people thought that if they just sit back and enjoy the show, the heroes will continue to do their thing and keep them all safe forever. But with the collapse of the hero society, the stage that the heroes performed upon has been swept away. The people are no longer just spectators. Everyone has been affected by this chaos. On top of that, Those heroes who were in it for the money and fame all bailed after Deku. And so the only heroes left now are those who are truly brave and virtuous. The ones who became heroes to save lives, even if that meant sacrificing their own life in the process. That same man then urges the crowd not to reject the true heroes who are still there fighting for them. If they reject people like Deku, they will have no one left to protect them once the villains do come knocking on their door. And again, this is a great point. This man really knows his stuff, and it would be pretty funny if he turned out to be Toga in disguise, but either way, this man is spitting. We then see Deku with tears in his eyes, because of course he has tears in his eyes, proclaim that he is no longer alone, and that he will do his best to give these people back the normal lives that they had lost. As even some of Deku's biggest opponents in the crowd seem to break down in tears, we are led to believe that the crowd has now come to accept Deku, which if true would be a major step forward in the story, as would of course Deku's comment that he is no longer alone. The focus of the chapter then shifts to other heroes commenting on Ochako's speech and its aftermath, including Hawks, Endeavor, Shoto, and Ectoplasm. Endeavor is worried that they really didn't make much progress when it comes to shifting the burden away from Deku, because the crowd will now expect Deku to defeat the villains and bring back their normal lives in return for letting him stay at UA. But Hawks does believe that progress has been made. The people are beginning to realize that everyone is connected, that everyone is in this together, and that is an important development. This is no longer the kind of world where heroes rescue everyone and civilians merely observe everything from the sidelines. In a time of unprecedented chaos and a historic hero shortage, everyone will have to work together. Everyone must take responsibility, both hero and civilian alike. We then jump to Nezu, I guess FaceTiming Aizawa, who is recovering after injuring his right eye and losing his right leg during the Battle of Deku. Nezu tells Aizawa that his class pulled off what he himself was unable to do. They succeeded in reaching out to the angry crowd and getting them to soften their stance. Aizawa is clearly very proud of his students, and he goes on to tell Nezu about Kurogiri. It is then confirmed that Kurogiri did not break out of Tartarus during the villain prison break, because Kurogiri was secretly transported to another location and he is currently being experimented on in an attempt to reach Oboro Shirakumo. Oboro is of course Aizawa's childhood friend who had been turned into the Nomu known as Kurogiri by All For One and Ujiko. If Oboro had not regained consciousness for that brief moment in order to warn everyone about the hospital, it is likely that the hero raids would not have been as effective as they were, and the villains would have caused even more damage to the hero society. Aizawa believes that because he was able to emerge, if only briefly, there is still a faint hope that Oboro can retake control of his body sometime in the future. I did a whole video recently explaining the Oboro Kurogiri situation, definitely check it out, link in the description. And in that video I speculated that Oboro's ability to briefly regain consciousness signals the possibility that he could eventually return permanently. This chapter seems to further encourage those types of speculations, but we'll have to wait and see. The chapter ends with Aizawa mentioning Toga, and Nezu explaining that the UA has anti-Toga countermeasures in place. This includes letting evacuees in only after a certain period of time has passed, because the heroes are assuming that Toga's transformations have a time limit. So, presumably, if they wait long enough, any potential Toga transformation would revert back to her original form before she was allowed to enter the UA grounds. Aizawa then confirms that the UA is a stronghold and that now is the time for revenge. But the very last panel shows a somber looking All Might standing out in the rain with the text "The rain still pours" written on the side, which seems to imply that the hero's troubles are not yet over, and that is how this chapter ends. And let me say right away that this mention of Toga was no random coincidence. As you will recall, we saw an image of her in the last chapter during Ochako's speech, and now she's mentioned again by totally different characters. I think that this is foreshadowing that Toga will infiltrate the UA if she hasn't done so already. Don't forget this important detail. The heroes are still not aware that Toga's quirk had awakened during the My Villain Academia arc. Because Toga didn't really do much during the Battle of Deku, No one saw her newfound abilities. And if Toga's quirk is now able to copy the quirks of the people she has transformed into, meaning that she has gotten a massive power-up, then it is totally possible that once her quirk was awakened, she also gained the ability to stay transformed for a longer period of time. Nezu and the other heroes are going off the information that they had about Toga's quirk before her awakening, which is exactly what Curious had been doing before it backfired on her spectacularly. Thanks to her massive quirk awakening power-up, Toga might already be inside the UA. In fact, she might even be that man who so eloquently made the case for letting Deku stay. We know that Toga wants revenge for what happened to Twice, and we know that the villains want Deku to stay in one place so that they can come get him. We also know that the story went out of its way to break down the specifics of the UA's new security system. If we take into account the concept of Chekhov's gun, the fact that the story included a detailed explanation of the new security system at UA means that the security system is likely going to be tested by the villains at some point in the future. Chances are that the villains will attack the UA at some point, and that is where the final showdown of the entire series could take place. And if that is the ultimate plan for the story, then having Toga infiltrating the UA makes perfect sense. Especially since she did so little during the entire massive Jakku incident. I was honestly surprised by how small of a role Toga played in Jakku, but if her plan was not to draw attention to herself so that she could infiltrate the UA later, then that would make perfect sense. At any rate, here are the major developments that we got in this chapter as I see them. First, we have the confirmation that Deku now knows that he has to work together with others. And second, we have those anti-Deku protesters finally appearing to accept his presence at UA. Then we have the brief references to Oboro and Toga. Some might think that these mentions were very brief and therefore unimportant, but I believe that they are actually foreshadowing for future events. I think that Oboro really could regain consciousness once again, maybe even permanently. And I believe that Toga will become relevant in the story very soon. My guess is that she has already infiltrated the UA, and that her role is to set the stage for the final showdown of the series, which will take place at the UA itself. But let me know what you guys think. Did you enjoy the emotional elements of this chapter? And do you think that the mentioning of Toga and Oboro were important foreshadowing or just passing references? Finally, why was Endeavor wearing a fedora? I need to know. If you guys enjoyed this video and you want to see more in the future, do me a favor and leave a quick like. It only takes a second, but it helps a lot. And if you're new to AnimeUproar, or maybe you watch our videos but you still haven't taken the time to subscribe yet, make this the video that you subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications. You can also hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at AnimeUproar. Thanks again to Dislight for sponsoring this video. Check them out, link in the description. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, see ya, Space Cowboys!